I've been making Elder Scrolls content for a couple of months now, and one of the most frequent comments I get are people telling me how nothing's ever recaptured that feeling of playing your first Elder Scrolls game. For myself and most of my viewers, that game was Skyrim. I've heard great things about Morrowind, but frankly, my mother was delivering me in the hospital when that game released. Oblivion was my first Elder Scrolls game, but I had to learn how to read before I could play it. Skyrim just released in that perfect sweet spot for me and my friends, and nothing has come close to recapturing that experience and magic for me, at least until now. I had that exact question a couple of months ago. How can I relive my experience of playing Skyrim for the first time? There's gotta be other games on the market that have tried to replicate that success, right? And yeah, there are several imitators out there, don't get me wrong, but they just don't hit the same. That's until I stumbled across this completely free overhaul on Steam. I had never heard about it before. It wasn't advertised in any of the places I normally check, but something about this trailer clicked. And as I opened up the game for the first time, I had a feeling wash over me that I hadn't felt since 2011. It is my honor and privilege to introduce Enderal to you. A complete Skyrim overhaul with a new world, new lore, and new characters. This game is a product of when a development team can solely focus on crafting the world and story without worrying about assets or time pressure. It is the fruit of a massive effort by a group of mostly volunteers, and I say this without hyperbole. To me, Enderal is perfection. From this point forward, there will be zero story spoilers. I will be solely speaking on the game's structure and my personal opinion of why every Elder Scrolls fan needs to give this game a try. If at any point during this video you feel like you'd like to download Enderal, it has its own official store page on Steam, or you can download it manually through a mod manager. Both options are 100% free, and links are in the description. But now that you know how to get access to the game, let's begin our journey. I won't be the first person to tell you this, and I won't be the last, but you need to understand that Enderal isn't Skyrim, especially when it comes to the narrative. It's darker, it's grittier, it's harder, and it's slower. We won't be going into any storyline specifics to avoid spoilers, but I will be referencing the overall structure and its comparison to Skyrim. The first thing I want to coherently express is the difference in themes between these two games. Skyrim, to me, has always had undertones of comedy, from its over-the-top voice acting, memeable encounters, and of course the classic Bethesda bugs and glitches. Enderal isn't quite like that. It has a bit more gravitas, and although these two games share the same DNA, literally, Enderal's more like the older, more mature brother of Skyrim. Through the fire and flames, most of the bugs and major issues have been beaten out of Enderal through 600 plus modifications. Enderal is a trailblazer. It has little to zero handholding and requires you to adventure down the unbeaten path. Enderal is the product and essence of trial and error, where Skyrim is more akin to giving something your best shot and releasing it 8 times over the course of 13 years. In all seriousness, the themes of these two games reflect the environment in which they were created, which ultimately lead to the experience they provide to you, the player. Enderal has a much more psychological and dark story compared to Skyrim. The general synopsis is that this plague, called the Red Madness, is spreading across the country. This plague causes people to lose their sanity and become violent, and as you uncover more about the Red Madness, deeper and darker conspiracies begin to unfold about the ancient secrets of this world's fate. The story explores the themes of destiny, free will, and the consequences of one's actions. But at the beginning, you are no one. You are, of course, the hero to this story and begin to discover your importance as you move through the narrative, but at the start, you're not the Dragonborn, you're not a god, you are nothing. Magic drains your sanity and you can barely wield a sword. You'll die to a pack of wolves, and adventuring in a simple dungeon is almost guaranteed death. You need to be careful. You need to find food or a bed to regain health. Your adventure begins like you, watching this video, were self-inserted into the story. The land is completely unfamiliar, its story and intricacies unknown to you. It's a level of immersion difficult to articulate completely. But that's what Enderal does. It provides a deeply immersive dark fantasy experience different from almost any other RPG I've ever played. The developers took great inspiration from Gothic, a classic action RPG series, and used the Skyrim engine to bring it to life. Gothic is well known for its immersive world-building, complex storytelling, moral ambiguity, and challenging gameplay, all of which, in my opinion, Enderal executes to perfection. The music created by the Shure AI team does a fantastic job contributing to the immersive atmosphere and emotional depth of this game. The carefully crafted melodies and ambient sounds feel somehow nostalgic and create a profound connection between the player and Enderal's narrative, making each moment more impactful and memorable. All the music you'll hear in this entire video is from Enderal's soundtrack, and even though this game has some of the best storytelling and soundtrack you'll ever witness in any RPG, they made all the music 100% free use for the community. So, regarding complex storytelling, impactful decisions, and player agency, Enderal blows every other RPG I've played out of the water. Throughout your entire experience playing this game, little decisions you make will impact certain outcomes of the story. There are 4 different endings to the main campaign, but all of those story paths can be influenced by several previous endings to factions, NPC questlines, and even romance options. This is my second complete playthrough of Enderal, and I'd suspect you need 4 or 5 runs to experience every facet of this story in its entirety. There's an achievement for almost every unique conclusion in this game, whether that's a random side quest you picked up on the side of the road, a faction storyline, the main storyline ending, or even a romance option. It leads to around 20 to 30 different achievements, but even if you're an achievement hunter like myself, I highly recommend doing your first playthrough completely naturally. Pick what seems right for you, because even if you attempt it again at a later date, your story will be different. Contrastingly, if you play Skyrim twice to completion, you can experience everything that game has to offer story-wise, so it's a bit of a jarring transition when you realize a tiny decision you made 6 hours ago in Enderal affects what you can do later. In summation, the replayability factor for Enderal is completely off the charts. You truly require at least a handful of playthroughs to see everything the story has to offer. Now that being said, Enderal's main storyline would be considered more linear, despite the various influence and player agency you have. Skyrim has the main Dragonborn story, but stories tied to locations like the College of Winterhold can be done at the player's discretion. If you go there, you can start that area's storyline. Enderal is a little different. You can't initiate the story in, say, Golden Forest, but the actual campaign won't be there until you bring it there, if that makes sense. On the topic of open world adventuring, this also brings up the mechanics of how Skyrim has scaled level combat while Enderal doesn't. We'll touch on that in the next couple chapters of this video, but it is important to consider. It's difficult for me to describe the narrative without diving into spoilers, but the design for Enderal's writing makes Skyrim look like child's play. You'll often hear the joke that Enderal is Skyrim except it has a story. But the joke is somewhat warranted, right? Enderal is a fan creation and it has a game award. Like, from the actual Game Awards, it's a critically acclaimed piece of content. Nicolas Liatzu, one of the main authors for the story, went on to publish several books in the universe of Enderal that follow the story of Jaspar, one of the main protagonists. I think there was some issue with Bethesda and copyright or something, so some of the details had to be changed, but they have fantastic reviews. A bunch of the developers were also taken on to work on the new Gothic game. They really made a name for themselves. I understand it's a little cliche, but to truly understand this work of art, you need to play the game. Enderal is a country in the world of Vin, similar to Skyrim being a country or province in the world of Tamriel. It's divided up into several regions, 7 large primary regions, some of which are divided into smaller areas. If you'd like to take a look at the world or map while I'm doing this section of the video, I'll drop a link to the official interactive map in the description so you can scroll around and explore. But Enderal as a country is incredibly diverse. You get your classic rolling green hills, to freezing mountains, to desert wastelands, to crystal forests, to autumn canopies, you name it. Every area in this game feels like something new, and you can feel yourself progressing through the game as you discover new biomes and environments. Compared to Skyrim directly, Enderal is roughly 70% the size. Skyrim is 37 square kilometers, while Enderal is around 25, but it doesn't feel smaller. Interestingly, the content density is actually much higher in Enderal. Your compass is packed with points of interest and activities to explore, much more than Skyrim. There's also less emphasis on large, open spaces compared to Skyrim. Of course, Enderal still has these epic expanses of pure landscape with less activities to do, but they tend to be in less hospitable areas like Thalgard or the Frostcliff Mountains. But 90% of Enderal is filled to the brim with content to explore. The pacing of the world is another important factor to consider, and as previously mentioned, it's slower and more immersive compared to Skyrim. You aren't zipping around from town to town. In fact, fast travel must be earned and isn't available at the start of the game. You're not fighting dragons within the first hour of gameplay. You can barely make it past a handful of spiders. These more impactful combat encounters create an environment where you must pace yourself when traveling to new locations and think a little more tactfully. The most challenging encounters while traveling will likely be on the main roads, so you may prefer to take your chances hiking through the forests and killing werewolves and spiders, but you could also run into a nasty troll or mini-boss that way too. Another big difference to Skyrim is that the world isn't scaled to your level in Enderal. Here's a community-made map of various regions by their recommended level. Now, these ranges aren't completely set in stone. Obviously, if you're a more skilled player or playing on a lower difficulty, you can get away with getting to some of the zones earlier. But the levels on this map are roughly appropriate for a playthrough on Adept level difficulty. So, because you aren't scaled to all combat encounters, the exploration of the world becomes much more meaningful. Starting out, you will spend a good chunk of your time in the Sun Coast, a grassy, warm region to the southwest of the country. You'll become a regular in the village of Riverville as you help the citizens with quests and tasks before you're strong enough to make the venture to Ark, the capital city. You could try to leave the Sun Coast early, but there's only one pass through the mountains, and it's loaded with combat encounters. If you're not strong enough, Enderal's zone design will make that very clear to you. Speaking of Ark, this is the first city in any fantasy RPG I've ever played to actually feel like a capital city. It is massive, and without spoiling too much about this amazing location, let me just paint you a picture. Ark is divided into two major sections, the main city and the impoverished undercity. Both combined have about 10 fast travel points which you can access by approaching a directional sign. There's also a fantastic literary allusion to their god's outlook on how status and labor is assigned. The further up the city you go, the more status people have. Ark's criminal undercity is ruled by the Relata, a dark brotherhood-esque cult who polices and monitors all activities down below. And yes, this faction has their own questline, and depending on how much you associate with them, you can get alternate endings to the main story. Anyway, the world of Enderal clearly gives off a strong impression that no stone was left unturned. Enderal overall has slightly less quests and content compared to Skyrim, but it's more of a quality versus quantity situation. Enderal tends to focus more on the quality and depth of storytelling, with simple side quests often being significantly more elaborate than you would have ever expected. Skyrim has quality questing, without a doubt, but it's also watered down with the sheer amount of generic questing in that game. So, while exploring the world of Enderal, if you pick up a random quest, more often than not, it's going to take you on quite a ride. This might be the chapter I'm most excited to talk about. Enderal's combat is completely revamped compared to Skyrim. It incorporates its own set of custom combat mechanics and systems. Melee combat, in my opinion, is vastly improved in Enderal. There's enhanced enemy AI, there's combos, there's talents, there's stances, there's abilities. They really made melee combat feel on par with the magic system's flexibility, which normal Skyrim doesn't do at all in my opinion. In my first run, I was basically pure melee, and I had a blast. There's a variety of different attack patterns you can do depending on which combo you execute. Sprinting forward with a heavy attack will get you to lunge forward, doing extra damage but staggering you if you miss. There are spin attacks you can execute by moving sideways. There's parrying, there's actual dodging. Bashing is more important. Enemies can stun you. Blocking is essential for ranged encounters. It's beautiful. It blows Skyrim's melee combat out of the water with just a few simple adjustments. Now, it's not a massive combat overhaul like you may see on the front page of Nexus mods, but in my opinion, this is what melee combat should have been in Skyrim. Spells are also completely different and use 2 types of resources instead of 1. More complex and powerful spells not only drain your mana, but they also increase your arcane fever. This fever is explained in the first bit of the story, so I won't spoil it, but essentially, it's like a sanity meter. At certain percentage intervals, you will experience substantial debuffs to your character, and if you reach 100% arcane fever, you just die. Don't worry, don't panic, there are consumables in the game to lower that fever, and as you get better with magic as well, you'll just generate less. But at the start of the game, you'll be using and finding classic novice spells from Skyrim. Sparks, flames, etc. These lower level spells won't increase your arcane fever. That's generally associated with more impactful spells and healing spells. So, let's talk about the healing. This is probably the most jarring mechanic compared to Skyrim. In Enderal, your health does not regenerate passively, so healing is primarily done through food, potions, spells, or resting. I'll go through each method of healing in order of most effective to least effective. Starting off with resting or sleeping, and it's going to be your go-to option for full restoration. Even just a simple 1-hour nap in a bed will restore all your health, mana, and stamina. Luckily for us, beds are scattered all over the world of Enderal, but if you're on the road, you'll mainly find them in camps or outposts. General rule of thumb, if there's a combat encounter with a bunch of humans, there's probably a bed nearby. Food is going to be your next best option. It's plentiful, easy to loot, and cheap to buy. But you can't really use it in combat. Unlike Skyrim, food provides health regeneration over time, not an instant burst. Also, it only works when you're out of combat. You can't pause fights and eat a bunch of pumpkins to heal in Enderal. That will literally do nothing. If you're in a pinch during a combat encounter, your best bet would be potions. These do, however, come with a downside in Enderal. Most will increase your arcane fever. If you spam potions in this game, you'll actually make yourself weaker with the amount of debuffs you'll put on yourself, so it requires a little bit more thought and strategy versus Skyrim. Healing spells were generally, at least for me, my last option. They're actually a pretty good choice if you make a holy character that specializes in light magic, but for most characters, it's not super efficient. Healing spells tend to be extremely mana hungry, and they're going to increase your arcane fever really quickly. In my first playthrough, I played as a keeper, which is basically a paladin. Heavy armor, sword in one hand, and light magic in the other. So for that build, I actually preferred light magic over potions, but my new character in this playthrough is a mage, and healing spells tend to suck up way too many resources, so I try to stay away from them. Enderal also has an expansive crafting and enchanting system significantly more robust than Skyrim. Frankly, all I've ever touched was blacksmithing, but the armor you can make in this game can be quite good, especially crafted item sets. Yeah, Enderal has item sets. You can find some lying around the world as drops from bosses, or they can be crafted. There are a total of 15 different armor sets, all with unique bonuses that get stronger as you equip more pieces of them. You'll find legendary artifacts and weapons on your journey too, so make sure to store all of these in a safe place and don't accidentally deconstruct them all like I did. The progression systems in Enderal are almost completely different compared to Skyrim, and that's truly not an exaggeration. The only thing that carries over is the basic XP system in most RPGs. If you kill things and you do quests, you're going to get XP. Pretty standard. But in Enderal, when you level up, you earn learning points, crafting points, and memory points. Memory points are the easiest to explain. They're basically a skill point from Skyrim. However, instead of opening up a perk menu, you actually transport yourself to this pocket plane and physically slot these points into the perks you want. To my knowledge, there is no respecking in Enderal, so make sure you spend these carefully. It's a good idea to go into the game with an idea of what you want to play, because in Enderal, you can't do everything. You're not a god, you're not a being of immense mortal power, you're basically just a dude. You can't be the best mage on the planet, and the best archer, and the best thief, and the best werewolf. No. Side note, though, lycanthropes have their entire own perk tree, and they're so much better than they are in Skyrim. But your decision for your build and your character really matters in Enderal. Memory points do not come often, just one per level. Fortunately, the perks in Enderal are much more impactful compared to Skyrim. You can feel yourself getting stronger with each point spent. Some perks will unlock new playstyles and abilities to drastically shake up gameplay. It would take me way too long to go into every perk tree for Enderal, but a piece of advice. If you're unsure of what build you want to go, with your first 2 or 3 points, try to grab the first nodes for the Rogue and Mage memory tree. These will give you 20% regen for stamina and mana respectively, along with 2 minor abilities that you may or may not use. Those 2 are just generally good to have no matter what path you choose. Okay, that was just the memory points. Let's talk about the crafting and learning points. To consume these in your desired skill, you must read books. No longer can you just spam create arrows at an anvil to level up your crafting, or cast telekinesis and fast travel to level up alteration. Congratulations, you're now a nerd. Now, it's not that bad. Basically, you just need to buy these books and use them to level up your skills. My new character is a mage, and I want to level elementalism, which is essentially the destruction skill line from Skyrim. I need to find someone who knows the magical arts in a town and purchase my books from them. These books get more expensive every 25 levels. 0 to 25 is the cheapest, while 75 to 100 is the most expensive. Using destruction spells doesn't grant XP like it does in Skyrim. If you want your spells and weapons to do more damage and cost less to use, you need to read your books. Crafting points basically work the same way, except you only get 2 per level instead of 3. There are 6 workmanship skills you can use these points on, again through buying or finding books in the overworld. Handicraft, in my opinion, is probably the most useful, since it's used for all types of weapons and armors. Light, heavy, medium, swords, bows, etc. But if you don't want to craft any gear at all, there's plenty of other options. I'm not going to dive into them all, but rhetoric is extremely useful. It can cut the prices from merchants in half, and skill books get crazy expensive, so it's a very good long-term investment no matter your build. Rhetorics also opens up new dialogue options with NPCs, and you can get secret information or even alternate endings to quests. Objectively, Enderal's progression systems are significantly more robust compared to Skyrim. Unlike Skyrim's dynamic scaling, Enderal uses a region-based difficulty system, where certain areas have enemies with fixed levels. This approach creates natural progression and encourages the players to explore the world cautiously, avoiding high-level areas until they're prepared. But this system also fosters a sense of danger and accomplishment, making victories in harder areas more satisfying, rewarding you with superior loot to compensate taking on the challenge under-leveled. If you scrape and claw your way into the Whisperwood at level 7 and somehow find a way to kill just a regular bandit, they will have extremely overpowered loot for your current level. So, that's my pitch. Why I think every single Elder Scrolls fan on the planet needs to try Enderal at least once. Its story and world are deeply immersive, which work in tandem to provide a more structured and emotionally engaging experience. Enderal also provides a unique and challenging progression system, which has been a huge breath of fresh air compared to Skyrim. If you choose to pick it up on Steam, there's 11 supported languages, additional mod support, achievement hunting, cloud saves, and have I mentioned yet that it's completely free? Just look through the reviews, man. Everyone agrees that Enderal is on par, if not better than Skyrim, and I feel the exact same way. I don't think I'll ever return to Skyrim until I've done at least 3 runs of Enderal. There's literally no reason not to give it a shot. Even if you suck with modding, the install is just as easy as playing a regular game on Steam. I, myself, am not good at modding Skyrim. It's one of the fatal flaws I was born with. So most of the time, I rely on mod packs through the Wabbajack launcher for my modded experience. I really appreciate, at least on Steam, that Enderal comes bundled in its own launcher, ready to go. No messy files, no mods to adjust, one button, and you're ready to play. This is an added bonus if you already have a modded Skyrim client on your PC, because Steam will keep these 2 directories completely separate. Just don't get discouraged if you find the game overly difficult at the start. If you Google Enderal difficulty, you'll find thousands of people expressing the same concern. I would recommend staying on the default adept level difficulty if you can, because that's what the game is balanced around. I genuinely hope I've converted at least one person to try out this phenomenal game. If you've never tried it before and you give it a shot because of this video, please come back and leave a comment. I'd love to hear how it went for you. The only thing I regret about my experience playing Enderal is that no one told me about it sooner. I discovered it on my own, and when talking to my subscribers or Discord members, no one else seems to know what it is. I just hope there's one person out there who sees this video and feels the same wave of nostalgia wash over them like it did for me. It would make me so happy. And as much as I'd like to tell you to subscribe and like the video, all the praise should go to the Sure AI development team. I'm merely the messenger. Because Enderal is built off of the Skyrim engine, they couldn't legally sell it. Advertising and merchandise are also legally gray areas, leading to way less success than this game should have. If you want to show your support to this project, spread the word. It's been out for years and almost everyone I talk to in my community doesn't know what it is. If you enjoy the game on a more spiritual level, like I do, you can also purchase the official soundtrack. That's one of the legally acceptable ways you can donate to support the team. If you'd like more videos on Enderal, I'm more than happy to oblige. My entire channel is based off me trying new Elder Scrolls games and content, and I felt an Enderal love letter was pretty on theme. The game had its all-time peak about 3 years ago, so a lot of information online is outdated or incorrect, as the game has undergone many patches and adjustments since then. Part of that, at least for me, is exciting. I like having to figure out puzzles or discover new interactions on my own, knowing I can't use the internet as a crutch. But if you guys would like an up-to-date tips and tricks guide or tutorials, let me know in the comments below. And if you're still on the fence about trying this fantastic game, please, I beg you, take an hour or 2 out of your day and just try Enderal.